Welcome back to the Wizard Shop, and today we're going to do a double project update. You guys have been following both of these cars, and it's going to be really sweet, some of the updates I've done. Let's get started. So this is my 1938 Oldsmobile. I purchased it not too long ago for $11,000. It was a running, driving project, and the interior is mostly redone. I'm finishing up the dash as we speak, but the engine doesn't need any work, the transmission doesn't need any work, but we're going to go over some of the updates, some things that I've done so far. One of the things that I finished up is that I've added turn signals up here. Instead of down here where I had these ugly motorcycle rectangle looking things, I found these off of an old Harley I had actually. These are turn signals that are got a nice bullet shape, and they're chrome, and it kind of matches the shape of the headlamp. So the next thing I've done is I've upgraded the incandescent bulbs to 12-volt LED headlights. There are actually motorcycle LED headlights inside these. When I purchased this car, it had like 1968 Chevy round glass headlamps kind of modified and put into here, and it totally looked horrible. It didn't look like 1938. It did come with one good glass lens. This is the way it's supposed to look, and I had to purchase another one, and it matches perfectly. So now it looks the part, but underneath all that is LED. I'll demonstrate the turn signals real quick and also the LED headlamps. So there's the right turn signal. Kind of give you an idea, it flashes what it looks like. But I'll turn on the headlamps now. You can check that out. Nice bright LED headlamps. Now before you guys get all upset and say that's going to dazzle the drivers that are coming my way, it's going to blind them, I'm not going to drive this in dark. I just have no interest of having this thing after hours in the dark. If I get caught in an emergency, at least I'll be able to drive home. But that's a solution that I found that was cheap, and it works. We don't have inspections here, but it's still required to have working lights. So if I get pulled over and the cop says, let me see if your headlights work, they work. So that's all done. Underneath this bonnet, or hood, as actually they would have called it a hood back then here in America, it's not a straight six, it's not a V8, it is a straight 8. It's really not all that powerful. It's like 90 or 100 horsepower, but it has a lot of low torque. You can put this thing into first gear. You don't even have to give zero gas, just idle, and you can let the clutch out, it'll start rolling. It doesn't conk out like a modern economy car, it wants to go. So there's been no updates on the engine. There's really not a whole lot to do to it. Like I mentioned, it runs perfect. So let's go take a look at the interior. So one thing I've done is I found some paint that matches the rest of this interior, and it's actually camouflage tan. Like that. The tan version, or the tan color, it's actually called khaki for camouflage paint. I tried multiple different paints, and it will be way too bright or way too dark, and it's not exact, but it complements. It looks good. You can see when I close this glove box here what it will look like. It looks decent. Looks good. It's missing a chrome trim piece here. I'll add that in later. But as I mentioned before, I'm going to be building a small wooden glove box that will have my heater controls inside of here like this. So all you have to do is open the glove box. You can turn on the heater. There's hot, cold, defrost, floor, or mix. Those are the different options it has. I've also added this little guy. It's a nice white, looks like a pool ball. This was all I could find that matches this shift pattern. I looked and looked and looked. There was reverse was over here, or different weird things, or it was a 4-speed, but this is a 3-speed with the reverse up here, so it matched perfectly.
So Car Wizard, what's behind door number 2?
Door number 2, it looks like an ashtray, or it used to be an ashtray. It is no longer. It is a JBL Marine radio. So when I'm done listening to the radio, or even while I'm listening to the radio, I can close the door and you don't even know it's there. As you can see, let me move this out of your way, there's a speaker here, and I painted it to match the interior. It's a 6.5-inch speaker, a marine speaker actually, so it's pretty resilient. It looks decent. The lattice work and everything kind of matches that era a little bit. There's also one on the other side, but it's kind of harder to see. And that's all I'm going to do is 2 front speakers. I don't need to run a whole bunch of speakers. It just has some tunes. I can listen to the radio. And this little unit also has Bluetooth, so I can run my phone through it. And something else I have connected to this radio, charging port, and I can connect my phone directly to it. Charge my phone while I'm driving. And I will run that into my glove box so I can hook up my phone and place it in there. The next thing is what I've made for an instrument cluster. Now this isn't a finished product, this is about halfway done. But you can see the gauges there. I have all the gauges, but I just put one in to show you it has an antique look. The color actually kind of matches the car. It'll have the coolant and oil pressure and a fuel gauge and a voltmeter. And behind the plastic there you can see it's called engine turned steel. It has a nice antique look to it.
It's very Art Deco.
Yeah, that's kind of going with the theme of the car. I made that out of some angled steel and some, as you can see, some sheet metal engine turned stainless steel actually. And I cut the curvature to match the dash, and I'm using the original bolt holes that are behind it to mount it. I did not drill the dash, I did not cut the dash at all. Zero cutting or modification. It bolts right into the original stock location. And I run all my wires and speedometer cable and everything to it. Again, it's not completely finished, it's close. And I got in contact with a few older guys, the old school guys that work on these old cars, and said, can I rebuild this? Can I send it off? And they were like, nope. It's not happening, Car Wizard. There are people that rebuild these things, but if it's damaged, if it's cracked, if there's pieces missing, this particular dash or this style of cluster was only made for 1 year. That's it. There are none out there. So I took what was left of the cluster and I put it for display inside the office. It looks really good. I haven't damaged it or done anything stupid with it. But this is what I will have so I can drive this car daily and reliably. And someday when I sell this car, which I probably will.
Really? Yeah. Really shocking.
I probably will. I'll have the original cluster to give to the next guy and say, here, you can do something with this. All you have to do is unbolt this cluster and bolt this one right back in. There's no modification at all. So that way I can enjoy the car and not worry about damaging anything else. Let's go check out the Chevelle. So this is my 1966 Chevelle Malibu. It's a 4-door, a sedan. And yes, it is a muscle car. I don't care what you guys think. But we've gotten pretty far on actually installing this 6-liter Jaguar V12. For those of you who have not been following along, I'm swapping the original motor out of this car, which it didn't have a motor when I bought it. So I got this motor from J&J Auto Wrecking. They actually sent me that and also the transmission. There's a link below if you're curious about getting any parts, salvage parts, and you just want to know it's going to work. It's going to be good parts. That's the place to go. It's really simple and easy to do. That's where this engine came from and the transmission. There's some very interesting intake manifolds that are on here. I'll take one off and show you guys. These came from a company called Affinity Imports. There's a link in the description below as well. And for those of you who have also not been following along, this allows you to use a 4-barrel carburetor, 2 of them actually, in place of the crazy looking Jaguar manifolds. It is very well made. And as you can see, it says AI for Affinity Imports. It's a company that's selling these. You can check them out with the link below. You can get the pricing and contact the guy if you want to get a set of these. But these are very difficult. You can't just find these anywhere on the internet. You have to get a hold of this guy if you want these. Slides right on. Perfect machining. It'll have 2 carburetors, or as I'm going to do, it's going to have 2 TBI throttle body injection units on it. The distributor sits in the middle. There's plenty of room there for everything to go on there. Everything's coming along nicely. The mounts are all mounted up. We haven't had any serious issues until we hit a snag with the exhaust. Let me come over there and show you guys what I'm talking about. So these are the manifolds, the exhaust manifolds that sit on the side. And if you bolt them both into place, it has a center dump, just like I'm showing you here. Let me set these aside. And it will dump right onto my cross member. That's not going to work. So I've been doing some searching online to see if there's any aftermarket or XKE special manifolds that are rear dump. Every single one that I've found is center dump, all of them. And I suppose it's because most people aren't putting Jaguar V12s into Malibus, so that makes sense. So I'm going to go reach out to you guys. What I need is a log style manifold with rear dump. Talking about dumps and rears and things like that. But yeah, a log style manifold that has rear exit. That's what I need to have to make this work. And I just can't find it. Maybe you guys know, oh, well, so-and-so makes those. Please make in a comment a link where I could find those. I really appreciate it. Otherwise, I'm going to have some handmade, and that's going to be really expensive. So if you guys can help me out, I really appreciate it. So I mentioned to you guys about throttle body injection. This is actually C4 Corvette Crossfire injection, where it's one throttle body injector per throttle body, not two like a Chevy truck. I have two of these, but I make a plate that sits that directly on top of there. This system is throttle body injection is basically what it is, and it's extremely simple. I have a wiring harness and everything set up and an ECU to run all that, so it's going to be pretty much a no-brainer. It's going to be really simple to do. Let's go ahead and take a look in the interior, actually the lack thereof. So as you can see, the transmission sits kind of high up and it kind of intrudes into the firewall a little bit. It looks very ugly right now with the metal peeled away, but now that we know exactly where it's going to sit, I can cleanly cut all this metal out of the way, and I can order basically what's called a doghouse or a tunnel, an aftermarket tunnel that will cover all this up and weld into place, and it'll look stock. It won't look all ugly like this. We made a mount here that mounts to the bottom of the Jaguar transmission and utilizes the Chevy crossmember that's already there in the first place. We did have to relocate it a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. As you can see here, it has an electrical connector. This is a 4L80E transmission. I will have to get a standalone controller to operate it, but those are easily found, readily available, so that won't be too big of a deal at all. So one issue I ran into is with the drive shaft. This is the original Chevelle spline yoke, and as you can see, this is for a TH350 or a Power Glide, and that ain't happening. So I had to take that off, and I thought, well, I'm going to have a whole drive shaft made, or at least major modifications. But I found a company that sells that adapter. It mounts to the Chevelle yoke, the U-joint actually, but it has the 700R4 style slip joint, and it slides right in perfectly. So that saved a lot of time and a lot of trouble. I'll probably have to have the drive shaft shortened, but that's it. Once it's shortened to the correct length, I'll slide it in, bolt it to the rear flange, and I'm done. So that saves a lot of trouble there. One thing I'm going to do in this interior is the gauges are all pretty much fried on this thing. And I'll show you guys what I'm going to do with that. I'm also going to do a different cluster on this setup here. So I could have the original cluster rebuilt or purchase one that's rebuilt, but I actually came across this one was kind of a clearance deal. These are normally $500 or $600 or $700. This guy had purchased it for a project and never used it and just sat on his shelf for a couple of years. He said, Car Wizard, a couple $100, it's yours. You can use it, and it'll save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and you can just put it in your Chevelle and be done. So I said, sold, I'll take it. This is Intellitronics, and it is full digital gauges. It has volts, oil, miles per hour, RPM, temperature, and fuel level. Now in place of where the cluster was, I'll probably also get some more of that engine turned sheet metal and make a small panel. But once I do that, this is actually smoke colored plexiglass or whatever, it's just got a covering over it, but this goes over that, and then this has a nice chrome trim ring. So that'll look really nice. It came with all the transducers and all the sensors and things I need to make that cluster work, so that really saves a lot of headache there. And most of that bolts right up to Chevy type fittings or wiring or whatnot. So this lights up green. It'll be like bright green. And I think it'll look kind of retro and look kind of cool. And it'll kind of go along with the whole modification V12 thing. It'll make it look really cool. So we've got a long ways to go on these projects, but we are making progress. They haven't just been sitting in the background collecting dust. We've been making progress. And you guys know I finish projects. I finished Throttle. I finished many others. The C4 Corvette. There's a whole slew. There's videos you can guys go watch. So now we do have the yacht in the background. We're also making progress on that. We're hoping to have that by Memorial Day and have it ready to go, and maybe a little bit after. It's a lot of work to do all these projects, but we are making progress. I'm glad you guys are following along. They're very interesting. I try to keep these things interesting for you guys. They're things that nobody's ever done. I don't know anyone that's done a V12 out of a Jag into a Malibu. I don't think it's ever been done. So it's going to be a one-of-a-kind, one-of-one at any car show across America. That's going to be really sweet. If you're curious what kind of tools we use to work on these kind of projects, they're listed in my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. Very reasonably priced, they're not super high, and a lot of these tools that are listed there are tools that I would not run this shop without. They're time savers, headache savers, they're really, really good tools. If you haven't hit the subscribe button already, I really recommend you do that now, because we've got projects all over the place and cars coming into the shop. There's a lot of really cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.